Okay, we know P. Diddy is in hot water, but what about the celebrities he could bring down with him? Listed in some of the civil suits against P. Diddy are Grammy winners, Oscar winners, and even members of the royal family. This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. This show is called Scandal, after all, and this has got to be one of the biggest celebrity scandals that we've seen in recent years. Not only do we have P. Diddy listed in a federal lawsuit, but also other major celebrities are tied to the case too. Before we dive into all the celebrities listed and their associations with this case, I do want to start with a small disclaimer and say P. Diddy has denied all of the allegations against him on the civil side of things and on criminal too. He's pleaded not guilty. So far, he has not been convicted of a crime and in fact is set to go to federal trial in just a couple of days at this point, which we'll get into later. All right, that's out of the way. Let's take a dive into some of the celebrities. We've got to begin with Cassie, Cassandra Ventura, the singer known as Cassie. She's the North Star, I'm going to say, in all of this. All roads lead back to Cassie when it comes to the P. Diddy lawsuits because she's the first person who filed suit against Diddy. She broke the floodgates. I know we say that all the time, but she truly, truly did. She filed suit. After that, multiple people followed her pattern and filed suit as well, and then eventually he was charged in federal court. So let's talk about Cassie, the one who started it all. In her lawsuit, she stated that she started working with P. Diddy when she was only 19 years old, and he was 37 at the time. She says Diddy began, quote, almost immediately asserting possession and control over her and inserting himself into all aspects of her career and her personal life. Now, Cassie had an ongoing relationship with P. Diddy, and us from the outside thought, how cool. They're so beautiful. They're on the red carpet. They're singing together. They're putting out these records. Wow, everything looks great. However, Cassie alleged in her lawsuit that it was much more sinister on the inside. She alleges that Diddy forced her to use illegal drugs, that Diddy forced her to carry an illegal weapon. She also alleges that Diddy forced her to have sex with prostitutes. Now, she's the one who introduced us to that very famous phrase now, freak-offs, during which Diddy would sometimes drug, allegedly, the people who were involved, then allegedly force these people to have sex with prostitutes or commit some sort of sexual situation. And then allegedly, Diddy would either masturbate during this or allegedly watch and, again, allegedly, I know I keep saying this, but allegedly because he has not been convicted of a crime, allegedly recorded this and then used it as potential blackmail, saying, hey, if you come out and you talk about this, I've got this really embarrassing tape right here. I'm going to bring it forward. And now, allegedly, these tapes are going to be brought out in federal court. So I guess we'll wait and see about all of that. Cassie's lawsuit states more than this, though. She also talks about, quote, multiple times each year, Mr. Combs would violently beat Miss Ventura, that's Cassie, leaving bruises on her body, by hiding Miss Ventura in hotels for days at a time to let her bruises heal. So that was kind of fragmented, but it does go back to that really infamous clip released by CNN. We don't even play it here on Law&Crime because it's really, really hard to watch. We only like to show a screenshot, and even that is a lot. It's a very violent video of P. Diddy, it seems, physically assaulting Cassie Ventura. There's been a lot of talk about this when it comes to the trial, but also when this was first released, it's what led to P. Diddy speaking out for one of the first times in that now famous Instagram video.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life, but sometimes you gotta do that. I was up. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. but I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
Those are Cassie's allegations about what happened with her, but she also lists another celebrity in the lawsuit, Kid Cudi. In 2011, during a rough patch in Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura's relationship, Miss Ventura had a brief relationship with musician Kid Cudi. Her lawsuit goes on to state, quote, in February 2012, during Paris Fashion Week, Mr. Combs told Miss Ventura that he was going to blow up Kid Cudi's car and that he wanted to ensure that Kid Cudi was home with his friends when it happened. Around that time, Kid Cudi's car exploded in his driveway. So do with that what you will, connect the dots. Diddy allegedly blew up Kid Cudi's car in retaliation of him having a relationship with Cassie. Cassie's lawsuit was settled just one day after it was filed. However, it did pave the way for multiple other civil lawsuits, people to come forward with accusations, including Lil Rod. That's what he's known as, but his real name is Rodney Jones. Lil Rod was a producer on Diddy's Love album and lived with him for about a year during all of this. When Lil Rod came forward with his lawsuit in February of 2024, he claimed kind of similar things to Cassie. He alleged sexual assault at the hands of Diddy. He mentioned freak-offs, so we heard about those once again. He also claimed there were hundreds of hours of video and audio recordings of pretty illegal activity. This kind of corroborates Cassie's allegations, saying that Diddy forced her to record things. It also leads us to connect the dots to the feds who collected things from Diddy's home in March of 2024. So did they collect these thousands or hundreds of hours of video and audio recordings? I guess we'll see in court in a couple of weeks. Now, Lil Rod also mentioned a couple of celebrities in his lawsuit, actually multiple. And let's start with a major one, J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez. Now, she's been linked to Diddy in the past, obviously very publicly, because she dated Diddy from 1999 to 2001. And she's listed in the lawsuit in reference to the 1999 nightclub shooting in New York. Here's how she's mentioned in Lil Rod's lawsuit. It's kind of mid-sentence, so bear with me. Quote, Diddy's RICO enterprise has existed for at least 20 years, dating back to the 1999 nightclub shooting in NYC, when Mr. Combs required his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez to transport his illegal firearm into the NYC nightclub. The lawsuit states Mr. Combs shared that he was responsible for the shooting in the nightclub in New York City with rapper Shine. Mr. Combs' girlfriend at the time, Jennifer Lopez, aka J-Lo, carried the gun into the club for him and passed him the gun after he got into an altercation with another individual. So what happened here? This takes us back to December 27th, 1999. It's about 2:55 a.m. when a fight breaks out in a nightclub in New York. So who's there? Diddy, of course, we've got him, a man by the name of Jamal Barrow, who you probably know better as the rapper Shine, and then a third man, Matthew Allen, who was also known by the nickname Scar. So this fight happens, a gun is brought out, 3 people are shot. Thankfully, no one died and there were no critical injuries. However, there were some arrests here, including Jennifer Lopez and P. Diddy. That's where we get those famous mugshots now. The J-Lo charges were eventually dropped. However, Diddy and Shine both went to trial. And while some people say that Diddy potentially is the one who pulled the trigger and that Shine is the fall man, which we'll get to in a minute, all allegations, it was Shine who had the more severe charges, 3 counts of attempted murder and criminal possession of a weapon. When it goes to trial, Diddy was acquitted. However, Shine was convicted. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and then after that, he was deported back to his home country of Belize. Now, Shine has since come forward and been open about this, saying that he was the fall guy in all of this. He took the fall for P. Diddy. He told CNN, quote, what he, meaning P. Diddy, what he did to me as far as calling witnesses to testify against me, despite us pleading with him not to do that, anyone that would send someone to jail deliberately is a monster. Now, P. Diddy's team did respond to all of this too. Here's what they said to CNN, quote, Mr. Combs was acquitted of all charges related to the 1999 Club New York incident and has consistently maintained his innocence. He cannot accept or condone any characterization of his actions as demonic or malicious. Mr. Combs appreciates the path Mr. Barrow has pursued and wishes him continued success. It is unfortunate that Mr. Barrow has chosen to revisit these allegations. Mr. Combs trusts that responsible journalism will weigh both the established legal outcomes and Mr. Combs' positive, long-standing support for those he has worked with. By the way, Shine came out with a documentary in 2024. It's streaming now on Hulu called Honorable Shine. He's also a politician in Belize now, and watching some of the interviews with him, he looks great and he seems very likable. So go watch a couple of those Shine interviews. I also want to note that in all of this, we talked about how Shine responded, but Jennifer Lopez, she has remained noticeably silent in all of this. She hasn't really commented. So do with that what you will. Now, Lil Rod named another celebrity in all of this too in his legal filings, and that is a man by the name of Cuba Gooding Jr., Academy Award winner for Jerry Maguire. Plus, he was in Snow Dogs, kind of a beloved actor. However, these allegations are out there. Now, they come with some photos too. Lil Rod shows them in the lawsuit. He alleges that P. Diddy was, quote, grooming him to pass him off to his friends. This fear became reality when Mr. Combs introduced Mr. Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. while they were on Mr. Combs' yacht. Court docs go on to state, quote, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's legs, his upper inner thighs near his groin, the small of his back near his buttocks, and his shoulders. He rejected his advances, and Mr. Gooding Jr. did not stop until Mr. Jones forcibly pushed him away. I think it's important to note the past that Cuba Gooding Jr. also faces too. In 2019, he faced misdemeanor charges of forcible touching and sexual abuse. He had allegedly groped a woman in New York. Prosecutors said during all of this, 30 other women came forward with similar allegations. In 2020, 2 additional women accused him of sexual assault and 1 woman accused him of rape. Now, in 2022, he did reach a plea deal. He avoided jail time with this. He was sentenced to 6 months alcohol and behavioral counseling. He talked about these Lil Rod allegations too on the PBD podcast. Here's what he said, quote, I mean, that's crazy. That's the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I wake up in the morning, I turn on the Today Show, actor Cuba Gooding Jr. I was like, excuse me, pulling me into this? I think whatever Diddy's dealing with, he's on his journey, man. I can't imagine that he's stupid enough to do whatever he's doing and keep it on his premises. Now, if you thought the celebrities listed in Lil Rod's lawsuit were over, you were wrong because there's another one, and this one has royal lineage. I'm, of course, talking about Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. Here's what was written, quote, Mr. Combs was known for throwing the best parties. Affiliation with and or sponsorship of Mr. Combs' sex trafficking parties garnered legitimacy and access to celebrities such as famous athletes, political figures, artists, musicians, and international dignitaries like British royal Prince Harry. Now, what's interesting in all of this is it's unclear why Prince Harry was name dropped in all of this, potentially to bolster the accusation, showing that P. Diddy did in fact have these wild parties with major celebrity names. However, there's been no charges against Prince Harry. There are no allegations as far as all of that's concerned, and we haven't even heard a response from him. However, Prince Harry is mentioned. We've got more celebrities ahead, but a quick interruption for the sake of the timeline. Lil Rod files his suit in February of 2024. After that, March of 2024 is when the federal search warrants were executed at 2 of Diddy's properties, so one in California, one in Florida. After that, September 2024, a couple months later, he was indicted on federal charges. Those charges were racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. There have also been a couple of superseding indictments into all of this. He has pleaded not guilty, and since his arrest in September, he's been held in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, and jury selection in this case begins next week. Now, more civil suits were filed after Diddy's arrest, including one that's worth noting. Now, it's been dropped since all of this, but I gotta mention it. It was filed by a woman identifying only as Jane Doe, and she alleged that P. Diddy raped her in the year 2000 when she was only 13 years old. She says that it happened at a VMA's after party. She was drugged and then raped allegedly by Diddy. Now, at first in her lawsuit, she lists multiple other people, one by the name of Celebrity A, who she says raped her, and Celebrity B, a female celebrity who allegedly watched this. So at first everyone's like, wait, who's Celebrity A and B? What's going on? Jane Doe later amended her lawsuit. She listed the name for Celebrity A as Sean Carter, who you may know as Jay-Z. However, Jay-Z's team came out swinging into all of this. They found discrepancies in her story. So she eventually did an interview into all of this, and they listed, oh, you said one thing in the interview, a different thing in the lawsuit. This doesn't make sense. They talked to her dad. A lot of discrepancies in all of this, and eventually the lawsuit was dropped. However, Jay-Z did file suit against her and her attorney Tony Busby for defamation. Jay-Z was brought up in another lawsuit too, this time by a guy named Joseph Manzaro. He alleges, quote, plaintiff, meaning Joseph Manzaro, was drugged, transported against his will, and sexually maimed as a victim of coercive and organized criminal enterprise beginning in 2015, orchestrated and facilitated by the defendants. The pattern of threats, concealment, manipulation, and psychological coercion persisted for years, extending the statute of limitations under federal tolling doctrines. He alleges kind of similar things, that he was drugged, taken against his will to Star Island in Miami, and sexually assaulted. He mentions multiple times the phrase sexual maiming in the lawsuit, which is just a very vivid and disturbing picture. He also mentions in the lawsuit those infamous tunnels. So if you remember when things first started circulating about P. Diddy, this could be even prior to his arrest. There were those videos, articles, whatever, there are these tunnels under P. Diddy's mansion, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, okay, what? However, this is when we hear about the tunnels in a lawsuit. He says there was a tunnel connecting from Diddy's mansion to another mansion. And here's where we get a few more celebrity names. Singer Gloria Estefan and her husband, producer and defendant in this specific case, Emilio Estefan. This is straight from the lawsuit, quote, plaintiff was dragged through the back entrance of the Estefan mansion at approximately 12:30 a.m. Inside, Gloria Estefan panicked upon seeing plaintiff's deteriorating state, demanding, quote, call an ambulance. However, defendant Emilio quickly silenced her and ushered her away into the crowd. Now, once the celebrity name drops start in this lawsuit, they just don't stop. Here's more straight from the lawsuit, quote. At that moment, plaintiff briefly saw LeBron James, who was wearing a white bath towel, brown shower shoes, and carrying a shaving bag, walking through the hallway. LeBron James looked at plaintiff and, in response to Gloria Estefan's plan for an ambulance, remarked, y'all better do something about that. Plaintiff was then led by defendant Adria, who identified herself as Diddy's personal sexual assistant, and through a concealed tunnel that connected the Estefan mansion to defendant Diddy's mansion, plaintiff was secretly transferred to defendant Diddy's mansion. Jay-Z and Beyonce Knowles Carter were seated in the room, and upon seeing plaintiff, Beyonce Knowles Carter asked, what's this? What's this all about? Why is this half-naked white man with a something mask standing here in front of me? Defendant Eric responded, Diddy wants him to see what we do to snitches. This is part of his punishment. And here's where I have to point out a few responses from the celebrities that are listed. Here's LeBron's. This is in a statement to TMZ, quote, this is demonstrably false and doesn't even merit a report or response. A basic internet search shows what LeBron was doing all of April 2015. He was playing basketball for the Cleveland Cavaliers and never in Miami. Here's the response from Gloria and Emilio Estefan, quote, Gloria and Emilio Estefan strongly deny the allegations made. The property in question was never a home where Gloria and Emilio resided, but it was rather a house they owned for family use. There were no parties thrown at that property between 2012 and 2019. We have all necessary documentation to support these facts and will provide it to the court. And here's a response from Jay-Z's team, quote, Mr. Carter wasn't in Florida at the time to witness this incident. He was engaged in easily findable public activities that provide that he was not at this event. This is more nonsense that erodes the trust in our justice system. Now, Beyonce hasn't responded to all of this. However, both her and Jay-Z's names were eventually removed from the lawsuit when their legal teams proved evidence they weren't even in Florida. Jay-Z was actually at NYU and then later a Hawaiian vacation with Beyonce. So we went through some of the celebrities that have been mentioned in regards to Diddy, and now I want to talk to a celebrity of our own. It's former prosecutor Melba Pearson. Melba, you are like a celebrity to me. Every time you come on, I'm so happy to get to talk to you. So thank you for coming on and talking Diddy with us yet again.
Again, yes, Sierra. Like, wait, listen, we got a good thing going. What?
We got to keep doing it.
Don't fix it. Let's keep talking about Diddy.
Exactly. Let's keep talking about Diddy. And my first question for you is, the trial date is looming. Like, we're days away from when this is actually going to trial, which could just blow my mind. And I'm wondering about any celebrities, if they would testify. I know we've talked about Cassie, that we can expect her to testify, but could we see other people too?
I think so. I think so. Well, first of all, I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop that this is not going to go forward on May 5th,
Right?
right? I just, I'm like, "Ooh, I feel like something last minute may happen," but the judge has been very clear that they want to move this case forward, and they're like, "Listen, we're not gonna take any more delays." And of course, that is very typical for a federal case. This is not a state case that lingers 2, 3, 4 years. A federal case, they're like, "Here you go, get it moving." We're not going to keep prolonging this. So as much as again, I'm kind of torn, but we'll see what happens on May 5th. But I do believe that there will be some celebrities testifying. I'd be curious to see who, especially on the defense side. Is he going to be bringing any celebrities to either A, refute some of the charges that have been made, saying that, listen, so and so was present at this party and didn't and was hanging out with Diddy the whole time and didn't see them go into another room, something like that. Probably not with Cassie because you have that video evidence, but in terms of trying to discredit or basically take away the credibility of some of the other witnesses and maybe Little Rod and other survivors, that I'm very curious to see who is going to stand on the side of Diddy in this particular case. That's really where I'm watching.
I think we're all on the edge of our seats, like who is standing with Diddy? Because when these allegations first dropped, a lot of people majorly distanced themselves from him. And we haven't seen as much support for him. I mean, Kanye, I guess, is kind of supportive in a way, putting him on that track, featuring him a little bit. But we haven't heard that much from people who are like, yeah, let's go Diddy. So that'll be so interesting to see. And you talked about Cassie's testimony, which we know is going to be huge. I mean, I'm just going to say, I feel like she will be the star witness for the prosecution, for the government. What do you think?
110%, because it was her that broke the dam, that basically brought all of this to light. If it hadn't been for her lawsuit, Little Rod never would have filed his. We can speculate that he never would have filed it because of the fact that now Diddy's name is out there being associated with something so heinous. Cassie had all the receipts. And then when the leaked video came out in terms of, him brutalizing her in that hotel room, that got us all primed and ready. Like, wait a minute, Diddy may not be the person we thought he was. And then Lil Rod came with his allegations, and then it was a wrap. So Cassie is the one that got all this started. And I think she's going to be able to really lay the foundation as to her relationship, the types of abuse she suffered, but also the abuse she witnessed. So then once the other witnesses come in and start to corroborate what she says, I mean, listen, we all know Diddy's goose is going to be cooked on this one. Like, I don't see a way out of prison for him at this juncture.
When you were talking in that response, it kind of got me thinking because you and I have been talking about Diddy for more than a year now, and we've been talking about all of these allegations. But if we go back in our memory, just a year before all of these lawsuits started, he was getting the key to New York. Like, this guy was everyone loved Diddy. He looked like so much fun at his white parties, loved his music. So this is such a major fall from grace that we have to remember that before all of this, no one heard anything until Cassie. So I just want to go back to Cassie like over and over. She really started this all. And actually, in her lawsuit, she mentioned specifically Kid Cudi, that Diddy allegedly blew up his car after he got angry about a relationship. I know. What do you think? Some people are saying that potentially Kid Cudi could testify for the prosecution, that he could be one of the victims or survivors in the federal case. What do you think about that?
I absolutely, because he clearly was a victim. It was during the whole same time frame. It definitely bolsters Cassie's credibility in her testimony when she talks about the abusive nature of the relationship she had with Diddy. I mean, you can't get worse than that. That she's
Blowing up a
actually talking
car.
to
I
another
mean,
guy and his car gets blown up. I mean, that's something out of a movie. That's not even, and that also too speaks to his wealth and privilege and access. Because again, the average domestic abuser, and I'm not making light of this at all, but the average domestic abuser is not going to have the ability to blow up a quote unquote perceived rival's car, right? Maybe key the car, but they're not going to be able to do something of that level and get away with it. Because again, this is nearly a decade ago that Kid Cudi's car got blown up. And we're just kind of hearing the full story now. If it was the average person, they'd be in jail by now. They would have been in jail 9 years ago. So again, it just really speaks to the just pervasiveness of his power and how he was able to wield this effectively for so long, silencing so many people, putting so many people in fear, that now to have all of this come out, I mean, like you said before perfectly, it is a huge fall from grace, much like what we saw with R. Kelly and so many others.
Talking about this cover up in this situation, you made note of the Kid Cudi situation. And we also saw another one, at least allegedly, within the 1999 nightclub shooting. I mean, Shine has since come forward and said, I took the fall for Diddy. I didn't do anything. He did it. Now, I do want to note Diddy was acquitted of all of this, and he has come forward and said that, he was acquitted in a court of law. However, Shine says, I took the fall for you because Diddy is pulling all of these strings. And that also kind of gets me into J-Lo, because she allegedly had an illegal firearm and all of this, if we're going to believe Lil Rod and his lawsuit. What do you think about J-Lo? She has not spoken out about Diddy at all. She's kind of kept mum into all of this. Could J-Lo testify? Should she talk? What do you think's going on with J-Lo?
I think the only way she would testify is if she was subpoenaed. She's not going to come forward and say, you know what, did he abuse me too? Let me speak in support of Cassie or anything along those lines. I think she would have to be dragged into court kicking and screaming because honestly, I believe that her relationship with Diddy in the best case scenario was toxic, worst case scenario was abusive. And I think that she closed the door on that so many years ago and she doesn't want to revisit it. Now, let's be clear. I'm not saying that Cassie is going back and digging up dirt and revisiting it, but she also endured a whole nother level. We don't know what JLo went through. We're only guessing. And also, too, looking at the length of their relationship, it was much shorter than the relationship between Cassie and Diddy. So, bad things can still happen in 2 to 3 years, let's be clear. But Cassie and Diddy had such a much more widespread and spanning relationship with, the album versus can she even get a second album because he was, basically abusing her and saying, you have to do all of these horrible things for me to allow you to do a second album. And then even after all that, her musical career was just done because of this abuse, as opposed to J-Lo, who was still able to release records, go on tour, star in movies, all of that. So her star kept ascending while Cassie's kind of went flat. So again, JLo feels that she has a lot more to lose in terms of her brand. Obviously, well, she's with Ben Affleck. She's not. She's with him. She's not. But
We don't
that
know.
too probably could be playing into relationship tensions, things like that. So I think unless dragged in kicking and screaming, she's not going to want to touch this at all.
I think you did a really good job there of emphasizing the power dynamic between Cassie and Diddy. Because if we're comparing it to J-Lo, like you said, a much shorter relationship. And I feel like their ages were a bit closer to each other. And J-Lo also is a celebrity unto herself. But then we have Cassie, who was so much younger than Diddy, and he controlled her career and was pulling the strings in that way. So I feel like that's so important to know. We keep going back to Cassie's testimony. That is the one that we're going to want to see. We're going to have to wait for Elizabeth Milner to report it to us. We're going to want to hear about it. I also wanted to talk about more people in Lil Rod's lawsuit that he mentioned. He also alleges I don't want to say sexual abuse, misconduct, let's say, at the hands of Cuba Gooding Jr. on one of Diddy's yachts. He's also faced other charges and allegations. He's denied all of this as far as it goes with Lil Rod. He's like, why was I pulled into this? But what do you make of all of that? I don't know that he would necessarily testify, but could it be that this really happened where there's smoke, there's fire, there's other allegations? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, not only is there a question about the allegations, there's also the fact that he has successfully ducked service in terms of this case. So, if I remember correctly, there was, in terms of the civil lawsuit, the attorneys for the plaintiff was trying to serve him to basically
Yes, this is
answer
correct. We
to,
talked about this. Yeah.
right, right. So he's been able to effectively duck service. Why are you ducking service so much? What are you afraid of having to testify to on the record? What are you afraid of saying in a deposition? Or is it that you don't want to go to the deposition and plead the fifth the entire time, which is definitely not a good look? So all of these things are still going to be swirling. I don't think Cuba Gooding Jr. is going to become central in this case unless multiple people come forward and say he was present for this, he was present for that, or he abused me as well, or this was a situation where they worked in tandem, much like the unnamed celebrity that was in the room I believe that this was the situation where folks were speculating it was Beyonce and Jay-Z, but then also that lawsuit got discredited, that particular survivor. So, unless it's a situation like that, I think he's going to kind of stay out of the criminal trial. But I believe in the civil trial, much more will come out and he'll become more of a feature because, again, the standard for a civil trial is preponderance of the evidence versus beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's going to be very difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Cuba Gooding Jr. did anything at this juncture. We will see.
You're good to remind us about that because there's been so many updates in all of the Diddy saga, I'm just going to call it, that this one I didn't even mention in the bulk of the story that Gooding Jr. and I believe it was Justin Combs had been dodging service. So they were trying to, Lil Rod's team was trying to serve them with the papers and they kept dodging it for quite a while. So that's interesting that you noted that. And also, Beyonce and Jay-Z, I have to talk about these guys too. So you mentioned one of the lawsuits, Jane Doe filed it. It was eventually dropped, but Jay-Z was mentioned in it as allegedly having raped her. And then in a different suit, Jay-Z and Beyonce were also mentioned in that separately, that they witnessed sexual misconduct in that case. However, their names have since been removed from that. Now, Jay-Z and Beyonce, I don't want to mess with them. They're so powerful. They're named in these lawsuits and then it's cleared up pretty quickly. What do you make of that? I mean, I wouldn't mess with them. What do you think?
And I'm torn because, first of all, I'm a huge Jay-Z fan. I'm like, can you please leave me
Yeah.
somebody from the 1990s who I can still listen to? I'm going to be over here listening to this because, like, R. Kelly's
R. Kelly's
gone.
gone.
On, like the list just keeps going on.
Oh.
And I'm making light, and but the reality is, if he in fact abused somebody, I want him to be held to account. I want to know so I can no longer support him because I do not want to support somebody who has been harming people. That's like craziness. But at this juncture, we do not have any proof of that happening. And that lawsuit was, I had questions from the beginning in terms of, was this an attempt to silence her? Was there any machinations behind the scenes? Like, again, because of the wealth and power that they, were they able to quickly, put a kibosh on what she had to say? Or was she truly mistaken? Or did she make this all up from the beginning? I really don't know. And I don't have a firm sense. But again, the close relationship that Jay-Z and Beyonce had with Diddy is always going to be a problem. But again, knowing doesn't mean you necessarily have to act. Morally, we would want you to act, but legally, you don't necessarily have to do anything. The question is, if they witness something that could be relevant in this prosecution, well, get that subpoena going and bring them in. But we have no information at this point to say that conclusively, we know they saw something and they're just staying silent at this point. We can only just speculate.
Is it possible then that the feds could have subpoenaed Jay-Z, Beyonce, and we could be hearing from them? I know that this is speculation. We don't have any reports on this. This is all just us theorizing. But is it possible that we could hear from them in a couple weeks in court in New York?
It's possible. It's absolutely possible. If I was the prosecution in this case, and I'm sure this is what they did, you're subpoenaing everybody. Everybody's getting that smoke. Everybody. And then you decide as the testimony comes out, as the case progresses, okay, I need this person to bolster my case. You know what? This witness did an amazing job. I don't need to bring anyone else in because that's just going to, sometimes you can kill your own victory, right? So
Yeah.
you know that a witness did an amazing job. You've made your point. The jury's got it. You don't need to bring in more witnesses. It's just overdoing it. So you may want to shore up something else in your case. So I think it's going to be almost a game time decision in terms of whether or not the prosecution is going to call Beyonce or Jay-Z, assuming again they've been subpoenaed, which again, if I was a prosecutor, I would have found a way to do it. Just to be on the safe side in case somebody says something and somebody makes reference. It's not like I have to go find them, subpoena them in the middle of trial. No, no, you're on standby. And if I call you, you need to be in court by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
And the feds don't mess around. That's what I've learned in all of this. They're not going to bring the charges unless they believe that they have the evidence to back it up. And this is such a high profile case. We've been talking about it since before charges were even filed. So you know that the feds have been planning. And I think you're right. I mean, that's why we wanted to talk to you as a former prosecutor, that they would go through and make sure. I mean, if Beyonce did see something, they want to know about it, you know? However, I do want to say in one of the lawsuits that specifically named Beyonce and Jay-Z, their names have since been removed from it. And their attorney says that they can corroborate that Jay-Z and Beyonce weren't even there. This allegation of sexual misconduct that they apparently witnessed happened in Florida. Jay-Z was at NYU and later went to Hawaii with Beyonce, so they weren't even there at the same time. I mean, that is tricky for me, just like talking about that, the plaintiff's attorney mentioning these names and then later we can corroborate that they weren't even there. I mean, that's a big misstep against Jay-Z and Beyonce, right?
Yeah, no, that's huge. And that's one of those things again, trust but verify. Like you have to make sure that you are combing social media because again, we saw how the internet sleuths, especially the Beehive, because the Beehive don't play, but they were basically being like, okay, let's go back to social media. Let's go back on that date. Who was posting what party were they at? What were some of the public appearances? And again, being celebrities, their public appearances are well documented. So it's much easier than with the average person to track, okay, they were here, they're in this state, they're in this city, and clearly it could show that they weren't present for whatever incident that they were alleged to be present for. So yeah, that somebody did not do their research. And I mean, listen, this is one of those things you could have gotten a 20-year-old intern to start, checking that
Go
out. I
look
mean,
at her
that's
Instagram. Yeah.
exactly. It's not like you have to hire a private investigator to go figure it out. Just comb social media and you'll figure out who was where when, for the most part.
It's tricky because so often we do see in cases, criminal ones specifically, where the defendant gets caught up because we're like, oh, you posted on Instagram at this time or whatever based on your phone. But it's also helpful in cases like this if we show that Beyonce was not there. We have the receipts, that one's just a little out there for me too. Another person or two people rather who are mentioned in that specific lawsuit too, Gloria and Emilio Estefan. Emilio Estefan is actually a defendant in this. And the allegations started at his mansion. There were apparently tunnels underneath that go to Diddy's mansion on Star Island where all of this happened. They have denied all of it. However, when all of this first came out, the talk of the tunnels, I keep going back to my mom, who's like I don't want to say she's a very old woman. She's an old woman on Facebook. She's like an old woman, and the things that she sees on Facebook, I'm like, Mom, that's insane. Like, you're crazy. There are no tunnels. What are you talking about? But then when the tunnels were mentioned in this, I was like, wait, what? What do you think about the tunnels? If there are tunnels, the feds have to know about it, right?
Yeah, but being someone who lives in Miami, it's kind of hard to have a tunnel. Just because we're basically below sea level. Like it's not, we don't have basements in Florida. Okay. So this is serious. Like this is like El Chapo type of a business that I mean, you're going to have to get major equipment to bring in to create these tunnels. And it would be common knowledge because there's no way you can secretly build a tunnel between two mansions on Star Island again, because it's an island. You're on the water. You have to bring in major equipment to make that happen. So I don't think that's a real thing. Now, I mean, could there be a back door and a little path somewhere? Possibly. But I don't really see a universe, even back then, where the Estefans were really going to socialize and get down with Diddy like that. Like, that's just not, how do I put this in a politically correct way? They just roll in different circles is my point. I don't really see, I mean, they may all be at a party together. Let's say if it's the Grammys hosting something, whatever, they may be there together. But to say that they're going to go hang out at Diddy's house at a white party, I don't know that I really see that. But I'm willing to be wrong. Maybe there's a picture somewhere and I just, but it doesn't sound like there'd be a lot in common there. Let's just leave it at that.
I'm dying at the logistics of all of this because I didn't even think about that with the tunnels. I'm so glad I talked to you because I think I was right in all of this that my mom might be a little bit crazy, at least for several reasons. But I'm glad I brought up the tunnels with you because that really put a vision in my head about all of this. Before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about Prince Harry too, because there's been no allegations against Prince Harry. However, that's a huge name. We're talking about a royal guy here, a royal prince who was mentioned in Lil Rod's lawsuit, kind of just like a throwaway line, honestly, that he was allegedly at these parties with Diddy. Why do you think his name was even listed at all? If there are no allegations about wrongdoing at the hands of Prince Harry, why even bring him up?
I think it was a matter of legitimacy to show that this was the kind of power and reach that Diddy had. These were the types of people that were coming to these parties. So, again, that fear and the reason why they didn't come forward sooner was partially because of this wealth and power and access and all of that. Now, also, the one parallel I will draw is that remember, Prince Andrew was caught up in the whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
Ooh.
And he was, I mean, there were photos of him and one of the survivors who sadly, lost her life to suicide as a result of just the stress of dealing with all this over decades. But his image and name has been tarnished as a result of this because, basically he has been alleged to be, a sexual predator. So now it's sort of like the shine is off the royal family. And now you have the scenario where, okay, Prince Harry is now coming to these parties. What does that all mean? Now, that doesn't mean that Prince Harry is guilty of anything, but again, it's just sort of drawing these parallels and showing that the royals aren't exactly just hanging out in, Windsor Castle doing nothing. Like they're out here, they're partying, they may be engaged in improper activity, and it's just another way of bolstering that legitimacy as to the power and reach of Diddy.
Power and reach of Diddy. I mean, there's so many celebrities that are listed and many we haven't even talked about. Some we could see at the upcoming trial. So we'll definitely have you back on, Melba, once we go to trial because we have so much to break down when that happens. For today, though, thank you for coming on Scandal with us.
My pleasure. Always good to see you.
That's all we've got today for Scandal, but more Diddy is on the way, you guys. Jury selection begins next Monday. Opening statements are slated for May 12th, and we're planning to hit this coverage hard, you guys, with episodes every single day with updates. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss it. And in the meantime, send us any ideas you have for future episodes. Our email is scandal@lawandcrime.com. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.